Hello, welcome to Chapter 3 on epidemiology and disease burden. So some of the caveats before we start. So indication analysis or potential of an asset within an indication requires a lot of scientific, clinical, and commercial assessments to determine the value, the need, and the timing. All of the topics today and probably in the future lectures are essentially fields within themselves. So we have to scope judiciously as to the key topics and terms, and I'll give you sort of expanded readings to develop your knowledge base. So as such, the definitions will be sort of practical definitions for our cause. To understand these topics at a deep enough level for our analysis, but then there's a lot of materials that you can research on your own. For epidemiology, of course, this is a doctoral level field, so we need to know the basics. So some of the key terms that we use constantly in indication analysis and forecast modeling are the following. So prevalence. Prevalence means the number of afflicted individuals in a geographic area at a certain time. Usually it's annual, right? That's basically the number of cases that are out there. The prevalence rate is a rate of inflicted individuals over time. That could be sort of a percentage of the population. The incidence is the number of new cases per year. So how many new cases in a disease come up within a year is the incidence, and that's also the incidence rate, right? So the number of new cases per year. And then finally, mortality is the number of deaths caused by that indication. And it's not necessarily inclusive of comorbidities, right? So it's basically death due to that disease or affliction. And the mortality rate is a rate of deaths per year. Before we dive into relative and absolute risk, there is a reading that I've attached where I will just kind of review it at a cursory level, where they really go over a very deep dives into quantifying uncertainty, disease frequency, prevalence, and incidence rates, and the risks and measures of an effect. If you go down this document, you will get very descriptive, detailed definitions of various epidemiological terms. Where this is important is the fact that this can serve as your resource to get these terms and then to understand it at a deeper level. We'll take an adjustment of this table to understand the difference between relative and absolute risk. So this table, which is basically split into deaths and survival and mortality risk of a treatment versus a placebo. So in the treatment, you have 2 deaths and 48 people survive. So the mortality risk is 2 divided by 50 or 0.04 or 4%. Placebo has 10 deaths, survival as 40 out of 50 patients. And so the mortality risk is 0.2 or 20%. The relative risk is a ratio of the treatment of exposure versus no treatment. For example, it's basically the 4% divided by the 20%, or about a fifth or 20%. That essentially means that those taking the treatment die 1/5 times those who don't take the treatment. The relative risk reduction is the difference of 20% from the 1, so 1 minus RR, which is 80%. Basically means there's an 80% chance that taking the treatment will prevent death than not taking it. Absolute risk is a direct comparison of the two effects, and it is time-bound. So absolute risk is a risk 1 minus a risk 2, which is basically the 0.2 minus the 0.04 gives you 0.16. And that basically